Okay, so we're talking about, again, a quick summary, the three matzahs. Why do we have three matzahs? We have two matzahs because this is required every Shabbos or Yom Tov meal, and Pesach is no exception. So we have to start off with two breads, obviously unleavened bread, matzah, but bread nonetheless. So again, we just said, why do we have two breads at every Shabbos and Yom Tov meal? It's to remember that in the desert, no manna fell on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Instead, a double portion fell on Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov, to remember that every Shabbos and Yom Tov meal begins with two, after making Kiddush, two loaves of bread. In the case of Pesach, two loaves of unleavened bread, known as Matzah. That's why we have two. As I just mentioned too, this is why do we have to remember this every single Shabbos and Yom Tov? It's perhaps the most critical message that we need to know in life, and that is that Hashem is the provider. We make the channels. He's the provider. It's still, in essence, manna from heaven. That's why we need two matzahs. Why is there a third matzah? The reason for the third matzah is as follows. The Torah describes matzah not only as unleavened, but as lechem oini, which means poor person's bread. And a poor person never eats all of his food at once. He or she always puts away for later. Therefore, before we begin the recitation of the Haggadah, which the Torah says should be said over poor man's bread, we have to have the poor man's bread in front of us, which means we have to have broken one piece and put away part of it for later. This is way before we're going to eat the matzah. This is the beginning of the Seder. Therefore, we have to start with three. If you want to end off, by the time we come to making the blessing of the matzah, we want to have two whole matzahs, and we also want to satisfy the proviso of saying the Haggadah over a broken matzah, then obviously we need to have three. One we're going to break early on so that it fulfills the provision of poor man's bread and still be left with two whole matzahs. So when we make the blessing over the bread, the poor man's bread, we will have two whole breads, two whole matzahs. That's why we need three. Some more detail. The custom is that broken piece of matzah to be put away for later. When for later? So the custom is that serves as the afikomen. What's the afikomen? What does the word afikomen mean for that matter? That's a very good question. It's not Hebrew. It's actually Aramaic, and it's a combination of two words. Afikumon. Afikumon is afikomen. What do these two words mean? They mean take out or bring food. What does this mean? This means as follows. It used to be at the end of the meal, so the host or whatever the people would then say, please bring out fruit or beverage as a dessert. The time has come to bring out the dessert. Afikumon, bring food. Conclusion, it's a reference to dessert, which means the last thing that we eat at the meal. The afikomen is the last thing we eat at the meal. Why? In fact, we're not allowed to eat anything after the afikomen, because the afikomen represents the Paschal Lamb. Our Seders are woefully deficient because we don't have one of the highlights of the Seder, which is that each member, each person at the Seder is commanded in the Torah to eat a piece of roast lamb, which was prepared out of Pesach, slaughtered and prepared in the temple precincts. Everybody converged on Jerusalem for Pesach, or at least all those that could. Since the temple is destroyed, we don't live in Israel. Even those who do live in Israel, there's no temple. So therefore, of course, there's no Paschal lamb. So we were presented on the Seder plate with the shank bone, and we eat the matzah, the end of the meal, in lieu of the Korban Pesach. And it's called afikomen. Why is it called afikomen? Because the law is one may not eat an afikomen after eating the roast lamb when we ate that roasted lamb. So the name kind of coalesced, and we call the matzah that represents the Korban Pesach, after which we do not eat an afikomen, we call it the afikomen, because in fact it is the last thing that we eat. So the custom is that we, in breaking one of the matzahs, we'll soon tell you why the middle one, in breaking one of the matzahs, which we have to do, because we have to say the Seder, the Torah says, over the bread of a poor person who always puts away for later. The custom is we should break off a bigger piece, because we're going to use that to eat the afikomen, and that's a very important law or custom, quasi-law, to eat at the end of the Seder. We should never, ever forget that our Seders are lacking one of the most highlight of the Seder, which God willing we'll have again this year for Mashiach comes before Pesach. And getting a heads up, folks, the end of your Seder, don't fill yourself. You have to leave room. It's the main food, is the roast lamb. So for thousands of years, 2,000 years, we're eating this piece of matzah, and it's the bigger piece of the broken matzah to indicate how precious this is and how we await and long for the day when it won't be a piece of matzah we eat at the meal, but the Korban Pesach, the Passover offering, part which consumed on the altar, and the meat part, most of it eaten by all the participants at the Seder. Okay, so far so good? Good. So now, I mentioned this moments ago, and I'm going to address it. You may have picked up on it. Why is it the middle matzah? Why are we breaking the middle one? Logically, you break the top one. That's the one over which we break it very early on in the Seder before we begin the story, because the story must be said over poor man's bread. So why not break the top one? Questions clear? The answer to that is because when you make a blessing over matzah or bread or anything, it should be whole. We do not, for example, on Shabbos, as you know, your challah is whole. Do not slice it before the meal. There should be two breads covered, and you make a blessing over a whole item. That is the honorable way to make the blessing, thanking God for bread, a whole bread. Mind you, this is true of a fruit as well, for example. If you're eating an apple, an orange, so you peel the orange first. What you should do is make the bracha first, then cut a piece and eat the piece. And since we're on the subject of eating, the Torah way to eat is not to take a bite into something, sandwich, apple, orange, banana, or anything, but rather the respectful way, respecting the food and yourself, is to break off the piece and eat a bite-sized amount. This is year-round, any food. But back to the point. Let's not get distracted. Come back with me, please. You make a bracha over a whole item. So since we're going to be making the bracha over the matzah, in fact, two brachas, one over bread and one over the mitzvah to eat matzah, it should be whole. So the top matzah is not broken, so that when we make the blessing over the matzah, we are we're eating a whole matzah. We don't go into detail. We actually hold all the first blessing. We hold all three matzahs. We drop the third one and make the second one over the top one and the middle one. The middle one, because this is the real mitzvah of matzah, is broken matzah. The top one, like any Shabbos or Yom Tov, whole breads. We're satisfying two requirements. A whole bread, hence the top one is a whole matzah, and that's the first blessing you make. Hamotzi lechem mina oretz. It should be a whole lechem in front of us. Underneath it is the broken matzah. That's the second blessing, which applies to both of them, particularly the middle broken one, which refers to matzah specifically. In summary, in order to make the blessing, hamotzi lechem mina oretz, which we do every time we eat bread, on a whole bread, the top one should be whole. I hope that was clear. We haven't even gotten to our subject yet, but this is all important. Now, since we're on the subject, let me share with you this too, before we get to the heart of our lesson today. So the afikomen, what do we do with the afikomen? The afikomen is not just put away on the table open. It should be put covered. I'm not talking now about hiding it, that the kids should find it. I'm not addressing that right now, for another time. But it should be wrapped in something. And the reason for that is to remind us, as a remembrance, that when the Jews left Egypt, what happened? So you know the story. They left in such haste. And let's just get something clear. They ate matzah as per God's command the night before the Exodus. That was the first Seder in history. That's it. One time to eat matzah. They ate their Paschal lamb then. They had to put the blood on the doorposts. Mind you, it was on the inside of the house, not the outside of the house. But that's it. Matzah that night. The next day, nobody knew what was going to happen. They left in such great haste because the Egyptians were urging them out. They weren't in a hurry. They could have gone 2 hours later, the Jews. And the matzah could have risen, as far as they were concerned, and made ordinary bread. But they were urged and pushed out of Egypt, and there wasn't enough time for the dough to rise. They had to take the dough that they prepared for their journey out of the oven, and it said, what does the Torah says? They put it in clothing on their back. And that's how they left. And the matzah baked the dough, strong, hot desert sun, on their back, and it was unleavened. Then later, God subsequently said, this I want you to remember forever. You're going to have 7 days unleavened, no manner of leaven, because the Exodus took 7 days. 7 days later, they crossed the Red Sea. That was the completion of the Exodus. That's what we have, Pesach, for 7 days, no leaven. The obligation to eat matzah thereafter becomes only the first night. Just like in Egypt, they only were obligated to eat matzah the first night. Mind you, we have to eat matzah because we have to have Yom Tov meals, but that's not for the matzah. That's for the Yom Tov meal. The obligation, that special blessing, al achilas matzah, is only said Seder night. That's when the commandment is. The rest of the Pesach, no leaven, and matzah at your Yom Tov and Shabbos meals. But that's no different than the other Shabbos or Yom Tov. You don't make al achilas matzah, you make a regular hamoitzi. Okay, so that's why we put it back to the Afikomen, to remember that when they left in such haste, and the Torah describes how they put it in their clothing on their back. So we put the matzah, not leave it exposed open. The Afikomen is put wrapped in a cover. In the Sephardic world, they actually put it on their shoulders. I think they walk around the table with it, reenacting the physical leaving Egypt with the matzah on their shoulders. This is the custom in many Sephardic communities, not in the Ashkenaz world. And it's brought down in the Code of Jewish Law. Okay, summary. We have explained why we need 3 matzahs. We've explained why we break one of them. We've explained why we break the middle one. We've explained why the bigger part is put away for the Afikomen. We've explained why the Afikomen is put in some kind of cover, wrapped in a napkin or some article. All right. As you all know, it's hidden. This evolved over time that the children should keep the children alert and to create some excitement. And in many communities, they steal it. Chabad doesn't do that. We don't steal it. We don't hide it. It's just put away. The kids take it. We don't want to encourage that kind of behavior, even in jest. Anyway, but that's another discussion. A full class would be devoted to explain the custom and the history of the hiding of the afikomen, etc. Now, before I get to really the incredible spiritual, mystical meaning of the afikomen, I'd like to share with you this little known fact from the Code of Jewish Law. How much time do we have? Yeah, we have a little time. Okay. And that is, I don't think anybody does this nowadays, but it's brought down in the Code of Jewish Law. Please follow this carefully. As follows: that the 3 matzahs should be made from X amount of flour. It's called an isorin, and I'll soon tell you why. An isorin, how much is an isorin? Let's get some volume here. An isorin, which means 1/10 of an ephah, okay, is 2.5 liters. An ephah is 25 liters, and isorin is 2.5. So it's a custom, I guess it was, to make the 3 matzahs from 2.5 liters of flour. That's a lot of flour. Just to give you an idea, so each matzah is 1/3 of an isorin. So each matzah is 1/3 of 2.5 liters of flour. It's a big matzah. It would give you 29, enough for 29 people to eat their minimum required amount of matzah, which is about 1/3 of our matzahs. 29 thirds. Massive matzah. 3 massive matzahs, and they would do this for all the participants of the Seder. I want to tell you why. If you can follow this, it's fascinating. Really, a whiteboard or blackboard would help us because it's a lot of information you need to know. Let me say it quickly, so you'll get the general idea. What I just say? I said it's a custom that the 3 matzahs used at the Seder night be made of 1 isorin of flour. What's the reason? To remember the Thanksgiving offering. What the Thanksgiving offering? It's called the Korban Todah. Why remembering the Thanksgiving offering? The Thanksgiving offering, friends, is an offering that a person would bring in the Holy Temple, thanking God for having survived an illness, imprisonment, or having crossed through the desert or the ocean. Nowadays, what do? There's a special blessing we say at the Torah. It's called Birchas HaGomel. We thank God for bestowing. Gomel means bestowing kindness upon the undeserved. We are not deserving, no entitlement. It's all God's grace. So, the person travels overseas in a plane or on a boat and arrives safely. He makes such a blessing, or gone through a desert, or recovered from an illness or life-threatening illness, or imprisonment, a kind of imprisonment where his life was in danger. All of these things have to be where a person's life is in potential danger. Tonight we're celebrating coming out of Egypt, prison. So therefore, it's appropriate to remember this Thanksgiving offering. What does it have to do with the amount I just told you? So, okay, here's the numbers here, if you can remember this. With a Thanksgiving offering, a person brought 40 breads. 30 of them were unleavened and 10 of them leavened. Now the Torah says these 40 breads were made of 10 esroinim. So it comes out, if you do the math, that one isorin, if you're looking at the unleavened breads, right? So 10 esroinim have to make 40 breads, 30 have to make, of that, 30 of them are going to be unleavened. So the bottom line is that to make 3, if 30 matzahs are made from what? From 10 esroinim, 30 matzahs are made from 10 esroinim, so it comes out that 3 matzahs are made from 1 isorin. 3 matzahs. 30 of the unleavened breads were made from 30. So how many makes 3 matzahs? 1 isorin. So therefore the custom is to make the 3 matzahs out of 2.5, 1 isorin liters, to remember this is the exact amount that a person would use to bring his Thanksgiving offering, which we are doing tonight. And 3 of his 30 unleavened matzahs would be made with 30. 3 of them we made with 1 isorin. Since 30 would require 10, so 3 is 1. Okay, conclusion. It's an interesting custom. It's a huge matzah. As I just told you, each one of these matzahs would be enough for 29 people to get their minimum requirement. So 3 huge matzahs, which probably would satisfy, some families. We don't do that. Our matzahs are much smaller, way smaller. Our matzah, 1 matzah is enough for 3 people maximum to get the minimum amount of matzah. We're not going to talk about this right now. I want to tell you that Sunday night, God willing, my son, Rabbi Levi, will be giving a class. This is a must-listen class. How to do the Seder. This year is very interesting. I won't say complicated, but because Erev Pesach is Shabbos, what to do about your chometz, etc., how to eat your Shabbos meals, what to do. So look out for the advertisement, 8 o'clock Sunday night on this channel to all the how-tos of this year for Pesach. Okay, let's get now to the spiritual dimension of the middle matzah that I wanted to share with you today. Hope you followed all of that to some degree. Okay. Now, you all know that the 3 matzahs also have allusions to Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. The Jewish people divided into 3. So the middle matzah, therefore, corresponds to Levi. So now we're going to explain on a deeper level, a mystical, spiritual level. This is based on the teachings of the Rebbe's father. What's the significance of the middle matzah, and why we break this matzah, the middle one. Now a deeper reason, in addition to what I told you before, and what's the significance of the 2 halves, and the bigger one put away for later. In addition to everything I told you till now, that's all the simple level. Now we're going to go the Kabbalistic, mystical level for all the things I described before. And that is, my friends, is as follows. What's the whole purpose of the Exodus? The whole purpose of the Exodus is to receive the Torah, which is why the Pesach is linked with the Shavuos. We count 49 days, and then it's Shavuos, celebrating the giving of the Torah, because the whole purpose of the going out of Egypt, freedom is freedom. And what's freedom? Freedom is attachment to God. Freedom is the observance of his commandments. Then we liberate our soul. We're free. We connect to God who's infinite and free, and that's true freedom. Okay. So every step of the Seder hints to where all this is going. It's all going to receive the Torah from God at Mount Sinai. So now we're going to revisit the middle matzah and we'll explain why. That the middle matzah parallels the way the Torah is being transmitted to us. I'll soon tell you why the middle one. But the breaking of the middle matzah into two halves, and the larger half being hidden, as I told you, it's hidden. It's covered in a mappa, in some cloth, in some. The reason I told you earlier. Now I'm going to go deeper into that. The word soften, which is that part of the Seder, it's the 14th part of the Seder, of the 15 steps, which means, the word soften means hidden. Take it out from where it was hidden in the covering, and eat it. Now we're going to explain all of this mystically, and it's an incredible explanation. So what are we saying now? The whole purpose of the exercise is to receive the Torah. So therefore, the giving of the Torah and its transmission over history is hinted to in the Seder, and particularly with the Matzah, and particularly the middle Matzah. Why Matzah altogether? Because Torah nourishes us, is our spiritual bread. It's the spiritual staff of life. Okay, so now to explain how the Torah is transmitted to us over time, over history, and how it's hinted to in what we do with the middle matzah. First, I've got to tell you the following piece of information and text. Please get this clear. Very simple. The Gemara says, the Talmud says, talking about the great sage Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the greatest sages of all time. He saved Jewry. He lived during the Roman occupation, the destruction of the Second Temple. And thanks to him, that Judaism and Jews survived. So it says about him that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was such a great scholar, he did not neglect to study a great matter and a small matter. Dover godel, v'dover kotten. So the Talmud says, what's considered a great subject, what's considered a small subject, what's a great matter and what's a small matter, that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the master of. The Talmud says, a great matter, that's Maaseh Merkava. That's the deep secrets of the Torah, where we learn about the nature of divinity and so on, which we now call Kabbalah. What's a small matter? That's all the disputes of the Talmud in halacha, in practicality. In the words of the Talmud, Havayis, Dabayah, Derova, all the disputes of the two great sages, Abai and Derova, who debated and discussed many areas of Jewish law. Bottom line, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai didn't neglect to study the big subject, Kabbalah, the small subject. He was the master of halacha, of practical Jewish law. So as you know, so the Torah is therefore divided in these two categories, the revealed and the hidden. The revealed is the simple meaning of the text, the halacha, the Talmud, and so on. The hidden, that's the Kabbalah. Now, historically, it was just that, it was hidden. And for millennia, Jews devoted themselves to the study of the revealed aspect of Torah, which is called the small matters. The Dover Godel, the big matter, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the master of. Historically, Jews did not study. Jews did not study the Kabbalah. So there were these two parts to Torah, but one was hidden. The bigger piece of the Matzah is hidden. That's an allusion to the study of Kabbalah, hidden away till the end of exile, which is now. Now, in preparation for the Messianic era, we begin, just like at the end of the Seder, we take out the hidden piece of matzah and we eat it. It's symbolic to the end of our suffering, our end of our exile. Just before we declare L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, which doesn't mean wait till next year. His Mashiach comes now so that by this time next year we'll be in Jerusalem with Mashiach. The end of the Seder, we eat what? That hidden, larger piece of matzah, which is symbolic of the secrets of Torah, the Kabbalah, the great matter, which Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a master of. So incredible significance. The deeper now meaning, summary, and soon get to why the middle matzah, but the breaking of one of the matzahs and the bigger half put away for later. What does it mean? Tonight, if we're celebrating the Exodus, the purpose of the Exodus then was to receive the Torah. The Torah has two parts. One of it is revealed, which we've been studying since the Torah was given by everybody is studying it. There's a hidden part, the deeper, greater part, hidden away to be savored and be nourished by. When Mashiach comes, we'll all learn the mysteries of Torah. But on the eve of Mashiach's coming, the final generations, now was the time to study it, to eat of it, to partake of it, to internalize it, make it part of you. And that's what Chassidus is. This is what the whole Chabad movement is all about. The Chabad movement and the Hasidic, which is part of the general Hasidic movement, is revealed in the last generation before Mashiach comes. It's all as a preparation for the Messianic era. Now, in the study of Hasidus, we are learning not just about the details of the performance of the commandments, we're learning about the commander. We're learning about Hashem. We're learning about how He works, the deep mysteries of Torah, which we try to share each week to whatever degree we can. That's the larger piece of matzah eaten at the end of the Seder, which means the end of our exile, which is now. Throughout our history, Jews have done that in anticipation for the day when we'll all be consuming, learning, understanding, internalizing the hidden dimension of Torah. But for us, it's actually happening. It's not just we're eating this matzah and one day, the end of our exile, we are the end of our exile. And we are the great beneficiaries of the deep secrets of the Torah revealed in Hasidus Chabad, and particularly the Rebbe's teachings, the most profound of all. Now, why the middle matzah? Because the middle matzah is who? Is Levi, right? The three matzahs, Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. Moses, the giver of the Torah, was a Levite. He was the tribe of Levi. And Moses is reincarnated also in Mashiach. Although Mashiach, mind you, is not a Levite, he's from the tribe of Yehuda, but in his soul, we're learning about this at the JLI course, impregnation of souls, is also invested the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu. So therefore, there's this Levite quality even in Mashiach. So therefore, which matzah are we going to break to symbolize the two dimensions of Torah, the revealed and the hidden? It's going to be the middle matzah, which represents Levi, pointing to Moses, the first redeemer, and in essence also the final redeemer, the Torah given through him. Okay, so I hope this was clear. We got a very profound mystical insight from the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. He writes this, by the way, in 2-3 lines. We're expanding on it. As to the significance on a deeper level, to the middle matzah, it being hidden, put away, eaten at the end, and that's where we stand in the history of the Jewish people on the threshold of redemption. So what do we do today, friends? We explained, we addressed the middle matzah first at a very basic level, halachically, why we need 3, why we break it, why the middle one, why it's put away. We also explained at the end the deep spiritual significance of the afikomen of the middle matzah. Okay, friends, and now we ask everybody to unmute if you'd like to and make a comment or question. We would love to hear from
Rabbi New, it's Tema.
Yeah.
I would like to ask if everyone my sister is not that well right now. She's had a lot of tests done in the past little while, and we're praying, Baruch Hashem, that everything will turn out okay. And I was wondering if everyone, whenever they feel, could say Tehillim for her. And we're hoping for good results. And that's it. We're hoping that it's, it's good. She's had, we're waiting for some more tests to come back. And, I was just hoping maybe this group of women have a lot of good love coming from them, and they have a lot of relation with Hashem, as do you, and maybe if they could say some prayers for her. Her name is Phyllis, but it's Fegi Bas Yudit Miriam.
I'm sure you all agree. May Hashem send her a refuah shalema.
Thank you.
Yeah, amen, amen. I'm sure
Yeah.
everybody is happy to do that and give their blessing.
Thank you.
Rabbi, I have a question. It's Shana.
Yes, go ahead.
So from the beginning, when you were talking about how the Afikoman represents the Paschal Lamb, the Pesach sacrifice, and that's what we're supposed to be eating, why then do we have, isn't it kind of weird and confusing a bit then? Why do we put on the Seder plate the symbolic bone? Why isn't it more common knowledge? Why isn't it part of it that we do the Afikoman as part of the Paschal Lamb? Why do we have that symbolic bone or whatever?
I don't know the answer to that, probably because it's eaten at the end of the meal and some people have left already. They weren't around. But yeah, I mean, the Paschal Lamb is represented therefore by two things. The shank bone on the Seder plate, but really more importantly, probably is the Afikomen at the end.
Thank you. I learned that today. So
yeah, it's not so visual.
That's really, that's great.
Yeah, actually, I would tell you, that's why you got to come into the Seder like really hungry, and the meal can't be elaborate, because I'm going to give you, you may be shocked to hear this. If someone, not if, let me rephrase that, to observe the mitzvah fully, this is how much you got to eat before you get to the meal. When we first eat the matzah, we actually eat 2/3 of a matzah minimally, because we're fulfilling two mitzvahs. The mitzvah to eat bread at a Yom Tov meal, like any other meal, and the mitzvah to eat matzah the Seder night. Also corresponds to two offerings, but anyway, so right there's 2/3 of a matzah. Then you eat the sandwich, which is another third of a matzah. And the afikomen, that should also be 2/3 ideally. That's for the two sacrifices there, because it represents not just the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering, but the regular holiday offering that's offered every Yom Tov. It's called the Korban Chagiga, represented by the egg on the Seder plate. So the egg represents the holiday offering, which is brought Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, not unique to Pesach, and the Paschal and the shank bone, the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering. So when we eat Afikomen at the end, ideally it's again 2/3, each third representing another minimum requirement. So add this up. So you've eaten 2/3, that's 4/3, 5/3 of a matzah. That's a lot. Never mind the moreh that you ate independently and then together with the matzah. It's a lot of matzah. And the 4 cups of wine or grape juice. There really isn't a lot of room for elaborate. I know people go into great lengths and make elaborate meals. If you're going to eat everything you're supposed to, there isn't a lot of room for it. It's very simple, fair. Pesach day, that's when, you can, the more elaborate meal would be consumed. But at the Seder, It's really hard to do that and fulfill all the mitzvahs properly. Having said that, as Levi will talk about on Sunday night, what I just described now is the optimum. But the minimum, this is going the other extreme, minimum to fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah is not the afikomen. That's custom, that's a law / custom. The minimum is to eat 1/3 of a shmura matzah after nightfall with the proper blessings leaning to the left. One time, properly, without interrupting, in one shot of shmura matzah. If we do that, we're doing great, each night. What I described before is doing the optimum, the sandwich, and having 2 kazesim, it's called 2 minimum requirements, as I just described. So there's like everything in Judaism, there's levels and levels of observance. There's a basic mezuzah, there's enhanced, tefillin, everything that same way. Kosher, regular kosher, glatt kosher, regular is kosher. You want to do more, it's glatt kosher. And so many other mitzvahs as well. There's always enhanced levels. And at the Seder night, there's so much room for that, for observing the mitzvahs at more and more enhanced levels. But the details again for that more will be Sunday night, which is a more practical class. Thanks for your question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But there's no, there is no question that it's really, if you can, to do it all properly and to eat the afikomen, that's huge. We just heard last night. Last night was Mrs. Hochman, Mrs. Leah Hochman, God bless her. Mrs. Leah Hochman is 100 years old. Maybe is in 100th year at least. And Nacham and I are blessed to know her in our first went on Shlichus. We came to this fair city, to this country. We were stationed in Shamedi, and the Hochmans were members in our shul. She currently lives with her daughter, I think she's independently, in Toronto, and she spoke last night. It's taped, I want to get it. If anybody wants it, I will send it to you. She spoke for an hour and a half about how it was in growing up as a child, and of course the contrast today. Now, why am I saying it? Because she said last night something I just said now. Yeah, her and her 2 siblings, 2 of her siblings survived the Holocaust. What happened? There was a Rebbe, a holy person who lived not, a Rebbe, a Hasidic Rebbe, and their father got a piece of his afikomen, a small piece, and these 3 children were sewn into their jacket, which he didn't take off ever, and the 3 of them survived. By the end of the war, of course, there was nothing left; it was all disintegrated. And there's more than one story like this of people that afikomen. I guess it has to be who's afikomen, but and survived. Anyway, I'm saying that afikomen is very, very special, and so we should see to it to pace ourselves and to be able to eat at least 1/3. If you can 2/3, wonderful, but at least 1/3 at the end of the meal of the afikomen. In addition, not compromising the amount of matzah that we eat before, as prescribed by law. It's really, really very important. And as you heard now, the mystical significance of it represents the inner dimension of Torah. It's only revealed now before Mashiach comes, so it's really very profound. Any other questions, folks?
Sorry, just technically, Rabbi, if
Yeah.
the afikomen, if you're a table with like all 8 of us and afikomen isn't enough, you take extra pieces of shmura?
Sure, of course.
Okay, sorry, just
The 3 matzahs on the Seder plate, that's enough for me and my wife.
Okay.
Basically, that's it. You have to have a whole supply of shmura matzah to ensure that everybody has enough for the 2 Seders. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. What's noch? Food for thought. Okay, friends. All right then. Yep. So we'll see you, God willing. Thanks for joining. Everybody be well. And see you all again soon. Wednesday night at the JLI. Sunday night, Rabbi Levi. Look out for all the advertisement promotion, especially for the Sunday night share. Okay, folks? I don't hear you.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Rabbi.
God
Thank
bless.
you, Rabbi.
Bye.
Bye.